Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dr. Liz Wangaregeshimo, a clinical psychologist based in Kenya. Thank you so much for tuning into this channel, Mogekoyo by Ancestry, Understanding Mental Health. Today, I chose to talk about a topic to build up on our last video, which was on cognitive distortion. And if you haven't listened to it, you can just go back and maybe have a listen so that it can help with building up on what I plan to talk on today. The focus for my discussion today is why is it difficult for us to change, and how I choose to have this discussion is by focusing on a topic, again, that has been widely researched in psychology, called cognitive dissonance. Now, what is cognitive dissonance? When you have two conflicting ideas that are going on in your mind, they are bound to create a discomfort. And that discomfort is what psychologists refer to as cognitive dissonance. And one of the challenges with people changing their behaviors is because of this. What we're talking about is the discomfort, and the psychological word for it, cognitive dissonance. What causes cognitive dissonance? Of course, as we go along life, we do acquire views of what reality is about. Again, like I mentioned in my last video on cognitive distortions, our life experiences, the environments that we grow up in, go to form how we view life and reality. And when an event happens, sometimes that contradicts our view, then it's bound to create this kind of discomfort that we're talking about as cognitive dissonance. Now, one major thing that normally happens to us when we are going through this discomfort, because nobody likes discomfort, so it's only natural for us to try and resolve this discomfort. Or we can talk about when we are experiencing this dissonance. It's only natural and human to want to resolve this dissonance. And the question becomes, how do we do it? How do we resolve this dissonance? So, based on the environment that you grew up in, there is values that were taught to you. It could be how you should relate with people. It could be how girls and boys should relate. It could also be what foods you should eat, what foods you shouldn't eat, what kind of company you should keep, what kind of company you shouldn't keep. And therefore, based on these values that were given to you, when you encounter a situation which contradicts these values, of course it's bound to create the discomfort in you. And depending with your age, depending with how deeply entrenched or how much you believe or hold on to these beliefs, then part of how you resolve or choose to resolve that dissonance is either by sticking to these values or taking up the values that are being introduced. The whole aim or goal here is to remove the discomfort that you're feeling. Now, I'll take an example. For when I've gone or been requested to talk to youths or young people, teenagers, it could be in churches or in high schools, the major topic that they usually request that I talk about is peer pressure. And we know that peer pressure is not just a phenomenon for teenagers, even we as adults experience it. And part of the reason why we tend to move towards our peers is because one of the needs we have as human beings is a need for belonging. And of course, who wouldn't want to fit in with your peers? And sometimes the decisions that you make may contradict your values, may go against the set rules. But because you want to fit in, then, or rather because you want to belong to your peers, when they introduce something that contravenes or goes against your values or what you know have been told is the way to be or the rules, you will resolve the dissonance that they create in you by moving towards their side. I'll give an example. I was working with a teenager who comes from a Christian family, and part of the values that she has been given is she shouldn't drink, she shouldn't break rules in school, she shouldn't keep bad company, and according to her, bad company is any student who seems bent to break school rules. And when she got to school, one of the things that happened to her is that, well, according to her description, she seemed to attract the attention of many girls because she was smart, beautiful, and a lot of people wanted to keep her company. And because in her life she had never experienced that kind of an attention, so she thought, I don't want this attention to stop. And therefore, in order to especially keep the company of what she termed as the popular girls, part of the things that she was required to engage in is skipping classes, sometimes talking back or being inappropriate, especially in classes where the other student deemed the teacher to not be good. And also they had sneaked alcohol in school, so one of the activity was also engaging in that. Now, remember I mentioned she was from a Christian family, and some of these things were things that she was told are not appropriate and she should not engage in. But here now she finds herself in the company of girls who are popular and they are giving her attention. She has never before received this kind of attention. And what do you think she did? Of course, she's in therapy. So it means that she opted to resolve the dissonance that was created in her by going over to the side of the popular girls. And of course, it got her into trouble. So you can see that this is something that we all go through. And from my previous video when I was talking about the cognitive distortions, of course, when you find yourself in this situation, the natural thing is to, it's either this or that, all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization. It's either I do this or everything else is a mess. Okay? And of course, then, if that's the way you're thinking, it's going to impact on how you choose to resolve that. As adults, sometimes, especially in these hard economic times, maybe you had vowed to never engage in certain activities or business activities. I had a client once, a mother, who had vowed she would never engage in any activity that would compromise her dignity or, in her words, her morality. She would rather remove herself from that space than do anything that does that to her. So she finds herself in this position where her boss threatens to fire her from her work. And part of the reason is because, especially this space that we've been in, a lot of companies have had to let a lot of people go because they're not making in as much money. And so the boss told her it's either she agrees or consents to engage in a relationship, an intimate relationship with him, or she will be among the people who leaves. Now, imagine finding yourself in those kinds of situations. And she's a single parent, too many responsibilities. And in the current environment, getting another job is quite a challenge. So what do you think she chose in order to resolve that dissonance? We have another one, a gentleman, who again had vowed to uphold utmost integrity, never compromise, regardless. Now, challenging times, and is threatened. If you don't participate in helping us cover up loopholes as far as our finances are concerned, we are not just only going to let you go, but you will be the person who will take the fall. Now look at that situation. Is that an easy situation? And I'm sure as even you're listening to me give some of these examples, you can identify situations where you found yourself in spaces where it's very challenging and you found yourself in what we talk about as cognitive dissonance, and resolving that, the route that you take. And so you can see why sometimes changing behavior or staying with one set of way of being is so seductive, as opposed to looking for a better alternative, whereby it's not a win-win or lose-lose situation, it's just balance. Something to note as I conclude is that life is challenging, and in any one given time, you will encounter a situation that creates cognitive dissonance. That's just reality. And the important thing, so that you can be prepared to know how to work through the dissonance that you find yourself in, is to remember that life comes with challenges. You will have discomforts from time to time. That's just living, you know. You won't have just an easy time. It won't always be easy to make decisions. However, if you're very clear on your values, you take time to examine what are the possible outcomes of whichever situation, or rather the side that you choose to go to. Then that will be a good roadmap to help you with resolving dissonance. And always remember, key is to do no harm. You don't want to cause harm to anybody. And part of the reason why I encourage us to read far and wide, read people's biography. Who are you? For example, people you admire. Get their biographies. Read as far and wide as you can. Why? Because you will encounter stories of people who have been in difficult situations, people who were in situations that created the discomfort, cognitive dissonance, and the road they choose to take, what the outcomes were. And that can form as a baseline to guide you, to give you a roadmap to know if you find yourself at a crossroad, this route, this is what is likely to happen. This route, this is what is likely to happen. So, which is not just in my best interests, but the interest of the greater good. And so, I leave you with a parting shot that this is not an easy thing to do. Behavior change is not an easy thing to do. But always ask yourself, what's the payoff in remaining with the patterns of behavior that I have, and what do I stand to lose? And make an appropriate choice. Thank you.